All right, so this is a test case scenario for doing these large whiteboard drawings. So I am going to stick with the theme of fictional galaxies. Let's see, so we'll do with this. And in the theme of fictional galaxies, what we have is a series of panels that basically are sequential and more or less made for mobile devices and large screen televisions. Now the idea is that we're going to do these with rather quick things that become icons that then line up so. And what happens is these little icons are links, maybe, or something to other destinations, but these panels, when they're drawn, they all shrink to this and then they stack up. And then they stack up again, ad infinitum, category by category, because the idea basically is we're doing a mock-up for a make-believe phone app or an entertainment situation or whatever else is going on. Now, what are fictional galaxies? Fictional galaxies are fictional, so there's stories. We're talking about the land of storytelling. Very quickly, I've worked things out to several categories, which I'm happy with. One, I will just simply call it architecture. The other, I'll just simply call it documentation. The other, I'll simply call it stories. And then the other, I'll simply call it contemporization. Stories and contemporization are very closely related, but the one thing about contemporization is it's the conscious effort to make now out of the story. Stories, basically, what they do is they move around. So we talk about the past and the future in stories, we talk about fictional creatures in stories, we do all kinds of things like that. But contemporization is the activity in our storytelling of talking about now. So now really never goes away, now is always here. But we have a language structure that depends on that. So I'm going to try and make this go away. That was very nice, it's still sort of there. So what happens in fictional galaxies? Well, we have spaceships, and we have space stations, and we have other things like that. So I have a series that I'd like to do, which I'm calling Place Keepers. Place Keepers are basically a way to, once again, monetize the calendar. So what we have with the calendar and time-keeping systems and all of that kind of stuff is we have basically the scheduling for what could be called valuation. And that's really where we've been for thousands of years. What makes Place Keepers interesting is that in the land of phone apps and in the land of most everything else, you really have nothing more than a day planner. So a good phone app is like a calendar and a day planner and a few other things, an almanac, an encyclopedia, God knows what. But basically, let's just call it the calendar. Okay, so what happens with Place Keepers is this is a large screen television. And let's keep things simple. We have up, we have down, we have right, we have left, we have God knows what. But we keep our commands simple and we keep our menus simple. This thing can go down and go down and go up and go up. Basically, if I could find some good people to work with who could do things with vector graphics, for instance, or maybe a few other things, we could have a prototype. Okay, now, what happens with Place Keepers is that we're going around the sun. Now we can look at the sun, or scroll right or scroll left, but we're in a spaceship, and anyway, now the sun's over here, now the sun's over here, we do a 360. Basically, the spaceship is moving around the sun. Okay, so in Place Keepers on a day-by-day basis, what we're doing is going around the sun. And so you come home and you play your television, you come home and you do whatever you do on your phone, they work together, but you're, this day, well, this is March 1st, and so you're basically here. So on around the calendar, it takes a year in real time to play Place Keepers and go around the sun with your spaceship. And let's see, if you want to fast forward and have fun, it'll do that. Okay, the reason for this is that it's simple and it's easy and it's fun. So that's a venue or a place to put Fictional Galaxies right away. If anybody wanted to do it, that would be fun and applicable. But we don't necessarily need to do that. What we could do is we could just have Fictional Galaxies as a comic book. So Fictional Galaxies is a comic book. This is a porthole to another galaxy, right? If you go through there, you're in another galaxy. They're fictional. So now what happens is, in Fictional Galaxies, we have the main character is the Kathmandu, which is a ship shaped like a cat, which is basically the yellow submarine and the Starship Enterprise put together, okay? And on the Kathmandu, all manner of things happen. And so on and so forth, characters, etc. Now, this is only one spaceship in the land of Fictional Galaxies. We have other things. So what I'm basing my space stations and spaceships on is basically a rather peculiar blend of, I guess, well, call them characters, okay? Now, I'm interested in linguistics, so a space station could easily be, for instance, a Chinese letter. Now, in Chinese letters, you need two of them. These are not Chinese letters, by the way. They're make-believe Chinese letters. Anyway, so they say things that are poetic. So in the land of placekeepers, while you're going around the sun, in Chinese, you have these space stations that are saying things. This says god-awful Chinese characters, okay, or whatever it says. But anyway, there's a lot of that going on. Or you could have the alphabet, you know. You could have whatever you want. But these things are basically characters that are space stations. So, and the other thing that's happening is planetoids. So let's say we have these manufactured man-made planetoids that are hollow, that do this kind of stuff and this kind of stuff. They're all over the place. These are like, they could be resorts, they could be all kinds of other things. They're cool. Okay, now, so our spaceships and space cars and whatever they are come out of here and do things. Now, one of the things that's interesting to me, and that's what this is an example of, and this is what all things need to be that are doing this, is what we could call technical documentation. So technical documentation is a land of making things coherent. Basically, the new land of technical documentation is the combination of videos, the combination of graphics, the combination of all manner of other elements to create what can be called legible documents for either entertainment in storytelling or directions and what could be called directions, indexing, and other things for the land of instructions. Now, in the land of navigation and instruction, you absolutely require technical languages and technical documentation. Okay, so in this land that I want to both have fun with and which is absolutely required for what's happening in the next, say, God knows how long, 3 to 10 years, we're going to see all manner of things happening, basically due to a misunderstood concept called Moore's Law, which many people get wrong, but basically what it means is that every 18 months, the capacity of certain technologies doubles. This is very important because basically in the land of technical documentation, if you have, for instance, 3D printers, and if, for instance, you have semiconductors, and if, for instance, you have solar panels and batteries, and I don't think weather change is necessarily related to Moore's Law, but it might as well be, it's probably worse. What happens is you have a phenomenal manner of transformation happening very fast in what could be called areas of direct human interest. This is manufacturing, this is communication, and this is energy, and this is environment. All of these things are going to basically be changing very fast, this fast or quicker, over the next 3 to 10 years. Now, the interesting part about technical documentation and what we could call search and what we could call other things is that basically what you have is an issue of magnified, I suppose, or accelerated, I don't know what the right word is. You're going to have so much more technical documentation than anybody can imagine that basically think of the Library of Congress more or less times 4 in the next 3 to 10 years, maybe, just from the new stuff that has to describe the new stuff that has to describe the new stuff. Not only on this planet, but let's say, for instance, that in the land of fictional galaxies, something that's interesting with this sun situation, going around the sun, okay, we have Venus, Mars, and Earth. Now this is really happening. It's just like anything else. Once it's invented, the human race can't uninvent it. And so what is happening is that if we can get to Mars, we can get to Venus. To get to Mars or Venus, we're going to have to put delivery systems and a variety of other things around the sun, okay? This has to happen in order for this to be done. So what you have now is you have what could be called a corridor. I call it the corridor, which is a place where basically things are going to happen, this is a part of where we're going. So we have transformation on Earth and we have transformation in relationship to other planets, which involves a great deal of technology and is going to happen from 3 to 10 years, then from 10 to 300 years, etc. We're on our way. Again, very quickly, technical languages, documentation, search, all of these things are going to change very quickly. Okay, now, why is this interesting? This is interesting because we're talking about cartoons, and we're talking about entertaining cartoons, and we're talking about something that's cool to do. Okay, so this is our make-believe phone app, which has to be useful. This is our make-believe way of navigating placekeepers, which is something clever for large screen televisions and handheld devices. Now let's pretend that this is a panel in a comic strip, okay? And it's one of 4, and these happen on a daily basis. Okay, so daily we have this comic strip. What is it about? It's about clever and interesting comic book stuff. Now, I don't know, it could be about all kinds of stuff. It could be about contemporary art. It could be about comics. It could be about any number of things. It could be about technical documentation. It could be about fictional creatures. It could be about whatever you want. Comics are interesting. We've been raised on cartoons. Basically, since 1945, after the last nuclear war, we have been raised on cartoons. And these cartoons come with recorded noises, and they've been going on since the Jetsons, and actually before the Jetsons. Now, so this is a very simple format, and what makes it kind of cool, I suppose, is that there's a great deal of versatility in what could be called simplicity. So what we've now done is we've kind of described the venue, and we've kind of described the motif, and we've kind of described a few other things. But what about a philosophy? Is there a philosophy to all of this? Image making, or whatever else you want to call it, okay? Well, in my opinion, the philosophy that's important is an inevitable condition that's going to be happening very soon, which is that the economy as we understand it is talking itself out of existence. It's doing it very fast because mobile devices are not located particularly anywhere. The planet has been Googled, et cetera, so on and so forth. So we now have an economy which is basically quickly transforming due to the fact, and this has nothing to do with the stock market, this has nothing to do with anything bad, it just is that everybody can be, well, they're anywhere and everywhere, and they all have phones, and they're all connected to the internet, and they can all do different things. So philosophy, once again, is very important. And so in the land of depiction and contemporization, what we have is depiction, and depiction is very important. Okay, So cartoons, depiction, language, quick transformation of language, age-old archetypes like Chinese letters and cartoon figures and all these other things. These are basically going to be useful. They're going to be hopefully be useful for a while. The only problem that we have with our scenario is what could be called the issue of finance and automation. Now, you either agree with finance and automation or you have a problem with it. But what we have is we have the issue of robo-war, and robo-war is an industry. And I hate to say it, but it's probably that and advertising are the two major industries that are going big time everywhere. So in the land of fictional galaxies, where we have our little kitty spaceship, which actually can reflect emotions, do things, whatever it's doing, okay. What is happening? What is the scenario with that, for instance? The scenario for that, a nice little shorthand version that I have for what I'm talking about, is the issue of gaming and coding. Now, the difference between gaming and coding is brokerage, okay? Coding, literally now, is not the invention of a new device. It's basically the issue of complicated brokerage. You do not need to have a more complicated telephone. Not really, but they make money off having a more complicated telephone. In the world of gaming, you are a user. You sit there, and what happens is that you have a space, and then you divide it in two, you take oppositional roles, and so the space that was originally united now becomes an oppositional or situational situation. And if you notice our language, for instance, it's very hard to describe anything but yin, yang, up, down, this, that, etc. Now this has gone on for a very long time. But what about the neutral space between things, or any number of other things? Well, our language, due to a complicated process that we can call game theory or whatever, is prone to put us in a position of oppositional logic. Okay, and the issue of brokerage, or money, really, because it takes three people to have money. There's the poor person who's trying to get paid and use it, there's the person who's selling something, and the person that's doing the paying, and then there's a community, okay? What happens is that in the land of brokerage, the land of finance, the land of all of this language as we understand it, we have been left with a situation where, with this much transformation happening this quickly, we have two choices. And the two choices that I see happening are either green economy, and truly green economy means getting along with the planet and a few other things, and we have finance economy. Okay, finance economy is not business. Finance has nothing to do with business. Finance is, for instance, paying people in Ecuador a certain amount of money, but then selling their wages or their currency short in a market someplace else. So the poor people in Ecuador never know that some guy in Chase Manhattan or some other place is basically using, playing both ends against the middle, which happens to be the poor fellow in Ecuador. Currency trading, all manner of other schemes and financial instruments basically have nothing to do with business. Business should be straightforward trade or relationship or whatever you want to call it. So what's interesting about green is that it's inevitable. So you could either have a planetoid of happy Smurfs and other creatures and little elf people, God knows what, they're all happy and they're living on this planetoid, and you could have a planetoid over here basically based on war robots, and the rest of it, they could be, all manner of things. But the thing they have in common is that they are going to increasingly draw their energy in a green fashion, okay? Yeah, you can have cheap oil, and cheap oil is oil that you get from basically just pumping it out of the ground. That's pretty cheap. I mean, we make money off of it, but it's fundamentally cheap. It's right there under the ground. It's not good for the atmosphere, and it's not that efficient. But green, good or bad, is becoming more efficient, meaning that very soon solar panels and batteries are going to be so disposable that you can basically, this table will be a surface, any surface will be able to produce energy easily going into very cheap batteries, and that will be enough to run vehicles and do all kinds of other things. So green is inevitable. The issue is it nice or not nice? Okay, so let's just say that in my land of philosophy, I'm not terribly fond of finance because it's a game of musical chairs that basically, let's say you were playing musical chairs and attrition with the human race. So here we have musical chairs and all these people. My fundamental approach is that if we turn to each other right now, we might be able to have a chair factory or something like that. That's financial or business philosophy. In terms of depiction theory, my fundamental feeling about depiction, as I said, is that now doesn't go away. Okay, so since now doesn't go away, everything we do that is a depiction of now is less than now. So a lot of wise people have understood that, Zen, etc., so on and so forth. The depiction goes so far and no further. We might be at the threshold for viable depiction because the further we go down this road of finance and depiction, as opposed to green economy and an understanding of depiction, we become crazier and crazier and crazier and crazier. And that's exactly sort of what's happening to us now. So I'm an artist. I like cartoons. That makes it kind of simple in terms of philosophy. I can get along with most everybody, so that's not a big deal. We don't need any more guillotines or anything like that. But that's kind of what's underlying this. Now, the other thing that's underlying this is what could be called the concept of abstraction. Now, there are several image makers that took this on in the last 130, 150 years and did things with it. It's been around since China and all kinds of other things. It's been around for as long as the human race. But an artist named Kandinsky formalized the theory of internal necessity and the spiritual in art and came up with what could be called a theory of abstract expressionism. Now, this is just fundamental. Later, other people did things with that, but this, the issue between what could be called objectified or depictional, representational art versus expressive, abstract art is an interesting one because in the land of now, if you have now, what's the most fundamental relationship with now? Well, probably one that basically moves with a feeling of abstract expressionism. Now, does that really have a relationship with finance? Mostly, yes, because the people who have more than enough resources are quite happy to move the language of contemporization around and keep entertaining themselves. The only issue is, are they going to allow you to more or less live? And we have 7 billion people on Earth right now, and we're going to have to decide what we're going to do about that, especially if we're going to have indentured servitude on Mars, and we're going to have all kinds of weird body part farming and all kinds of other things going on around the world. It's going to be very interesting. Anyway, I lost my planet. So, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I am interested in doing this thing called Fictional Galaxies, which is a technical document, which talks about design and architecture and contemporization and depiction. And I like doing it with characters, and I like doing it with a sense of humor. So the sense of humor part is really, really important because basically we don't know a whole lot about reality at all. Okay, and what we have when we pretend to know something about reality is a bunch of useful stuff for a while. Basically what you have is a to-do list that maybe can go as far as 4, and then it starts to fall apart. So then you have to stop at 4 and go back to 1, etc. Because you really don't know that much about a whole lot. And what happens is that, well, everybody has a lot to learn. And that issue of respect for what could be called actual individuation. Actual individuation is actually kind of important. Actual individuation is very, very different from abstract individuation. Now, actual individuation is like the sun. The sun is pretty easy to find. It's there in the sky. It's actually there. It's an individual entity, the sun, the earth, etc. You, me, there you are, there I am, etc. Actual individuation. Abstract individuation is like talking about the kitchen, or the living room, or Nebraska, or Thursday, or any number of other things, where basically parameters of an abstraction are applied to an idea, and that gets moved around linguistically as if it has an actual individual identity, which we pretend is real or believe is real, but isn't. So actual individuation and abstract individuation are kind of important. So the reason I bring that up is because we can easily become lost in the land of what could be called depiction. We want to be artistic, we want to be clever, we want to move the words around, and we want to be seen in venues of, you always need, let's say, 2 people to make a picture worth anything, unless you like pictures of yourself. It's a fundamental part of communication. So, what am I doing with Fictional Galaxies now? I am basically looking for what could be called participation. And participation at this point is an issue of economics, because let's say for the next 3 to 10 years, what we have is the economy as we understand it. The economy as we understand it has clean air, reasonable water, not mutated people, but regular people. You know, it's not disaster-ridden, at least not in this country. And most of the disasters that most human beings are suffering under right now or with are man-made. So we have the ability with what could be called our mobile devices and our large screen televisions and anything else to more or less talk ourselves into a better economy for a while if we want to. The planet has been GPSed. The internet is useful. There's hundreds of people on the internet. It's basically, what more could you ask for? This is way better than trying to get around, you know, go through the Magellan thing or God knows what, the Columbus thing, trying to discover the coastline of the world, etc. We have come a long way. We've come a really long way in the last 50 years. So now, let's say that we have the ability to exercise the inevitable, okay? Which means that the inevitable is going to rule no matter what. Now, I brought up all of that stuff, which was kind of scattered because it covers a lot of bases fairly quick. But good or bad, like living in occupied Paris during World War II or any number of other things, you can either be on this planet, you might be able to go to Mars, maybe, but it's an Earth situation. And so we are on Earth, and we're not really going to go anywhere else. And we're going to have to get along one way or the other. Now, so let's say we want to have viable economy with participation. What are we going to talk about? What are we going to do? Well, the first thing that I see, let's say I would like to do cartoons about Canada. Okay, Canada. What happens in Canada? Let's say we want to have a daily update or something clever every day. Well, Canada, poor Canada, like in Siberia, big giant bubbles of methane are going to be bursting into the air. The North Pole is going to dump fresh water down the Hudson River and the Great Lakes and all this other stuff. They have 1/10 of the population of the United States, meaning that all the refugees from, let's say, now I don't want to get political, but let's say that the marvelous, wonderful, incredible Mr. Trump wins the election. Well, then you have you'll have all kinds of refugees going from Canada or America to Canada. Likewise, what you'll have is you'll have all kinds of people, unfortunately, from other areas of the world because it's reaching 130 degrees in Arizona. Okay, now, this is going to keep going on. This is not going to change. And one of the problems, unfortunately, is wind speed's going to go up and the rest of it. So we have this incredible area, which has 1/10 of the population of the United States, called Canada. So we want a topic and we want to have fun and all the rest of it. So what we'll do is we'll make fun of Canada. Yeah. That's Canada. Okay, but the Canadians, so I've heard, are basically like, they're bilingual and they're semi-intelligent. So they may find this amusing and they may buy our cartoons. That would be cool. So there's other topics as well that could be more or less entertaining, but these are real topics. And these are interesting topics and things like that. So I'm just talking about participation, viable economy, and topics. There's all kinds of topics that are interesting. All this transformation, all this stuff going on, there's a bunch to keep you interested about. Let's see, we could call it peace, and we could call it love. And like I said in another video, that if war is a game, war is over if you want it, which I think is a great piece of commercial art. War is over if you want it, which is for a little while still true. Okay, and the reason that is true is because it's a multi-billion, trillion-dollar industry of distraction, and you have all of these people sitting there playing war games. That's all they're doing is playing war games. They're watching war on television. They're watching war on their computers. They're watching war. They want to be giant robots. They want to do all this other stuff. They can't wait for the war. The only problem is, as it always is that war is hell. And war is not any fun. And once you get there, you probably would like to leave as soon as possible. So just all those bloodless movies and all the rest of it have nothing to do with war. So for a while, it's a game. And that's what I'm talking about, is that this game that we have available, when you're hungry and thirsty and desperate and all of those things, you don't have time to play games. You just have time to worry about what you have to worry about, okay? But we get to have the leisure time to have conversations on the phone. And so what I'm going to do now is have some fun with something which I think is fun, which is back to the land of contemporization, which if we're going to live in this land for a while, we can talk about talking on the phone. Since we're talking about basically the mobile device and the large screen television and the land of entertainment as presented by AT&T and Warner Brothers and a few other people, we might as well talk about contemporization and have some fun with it. So what I've decided to do, and I think this is kind of cool, is I've decided to have deities of phone minutes. Okay, so what happens with the deities of phone minutes is that they're based semi on Mayan math and a few other things, but the deities of phone minutes, each one of them has a name. Each one of them, you could have the beer, a certain type of beer, for instance, could be a deity. A supermodel could be a deity. A car could be a deity. Any number of other things. A way of spending your time, for instance, could be a deity. Deities could be deities. Lack of deities could be a deity. Anyway, the way it works is that the deities of phone minutes there's a game that you play with the deities of phone minutes. And what is the game that you play? Well, I call the game 51% or a meritorious assemblage. And the way it works with 51% or a meritorious assemblage is that basically what you have is you have 28 years. And why do you have 28 years? Because that's the math for the perpetual calendar. It takes that long for the number of leap years, etc., to work out even, so that basically you have something that you could have that works out evenly in the number of days, etc., for which you could have a game for all of the minutes where somebody could get 51% and win, right? Makes sense to me. Now, this is very, 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 very interesting. This has been going on for thousands of years. If you take the number of seconds that are in, for instance, 28 years, and you divide them by 72, 52, and 64, I think this is true of the minutes, you have a whole number, meaning that somebody may have figured this out a long time ago. Now, what this means is that there's 72 cards in the tarot, there's 52 cards in a regular deck of cards, and there's 64 what you could call squares on a chessboard. All of these games, we'll call them games of contemporization or opposition. One of my favorite games is Go, okay? And the way it works in the game of Go is you have 361 points, which is basically 19 by 19. Okay, what happens with 361 is it's very close to 365. So, what I'm doing with contemporization or 51% a meritorious assemblage is I am playing around with the deities of phone minutes and this fact, which is to me is of academic interest, and wondering for how long have we been going through something? Have we been going through this for how many centuries have we been going through this game? that basically is played off of this very simple math that has to do with how long it takes to go around the sun and the increments of leisure. Okay, for probably a very long time. And so my game of deities is very simple. There are playing cards, there's a chessboard, and there's a go board, and then there's a pair of dice or something like that, where basically you can change the rules and change the venue. And what you're doing is you're playing for 28 sets, okay? And if you happen to come up with, let's see, 14 plus 1 increment that equals up to a percentage point, you'd have to figure out, God, this is where I'm not very good at math, you'd have to figure out what is, let's see, 28 times this times 100, you would have to figure out what is 51%, okay? And then when you hit 51%, you've won the game, okay? Now why am I doing this? I'm doing this because a friend of mine, we had a conversation, a few years back, and I said it would be fun to turn eBay into a game, and if you turned eBay into a game, it would be absolutely wonderful. So he asked me, well, can you turn eBay into a game? And I thought, well, okay, maybe I can. And the way I'm doing it is with pieces of art that represent, these of course have to be authorized by me because I am the depictor, okay, or whatever you want to call it. So we have these depictions. In fact, the depictions can be characters. We could have a poetry group, for instance, name the depictions, and there could be, you know, they could live on the Kathmandu, I don't know. Anyway, but the thing is that basically in the land of depictions, what we have is clever arrangements of deities, which is nothing more than another theory of contemporization, that are being auctioned on eBay, and this auction and the attempt to get 51% of them is a game. Okay, so why did I bring all of that up? I brought that up because basically what we have is we have a very simple and easy to understand situation when it comes to how are we going to really do anything that involves the crazy, insane math that we're faced with. All we really want to do at any given point in time is deal with maybe 4 variables. And what you want to understand in any situation when you're dealing with 24 hours or 91 days or 60 minutes or whatever else you're dealing with is that we have been put into a situation of confined and contained attrition for the purposes of those who are in charge of talking on the phone, trying to make a living. So it's really unfair, for instance, for us to be on the phone trying to talk about making a living when we're being billed by the minute for the conversation. At least I think so. Okay, so this is my antidote. I plan on taking phone minutes, turning them into deities, and selling them at my own price, right? And it fits into what these guys are doing anyway. They've been doing it for a long time. And they know, in the game of musical chairs, for instance, that there's not enough time in the day to actually save up to pay the rent. Okay, now, let's see, do I have any more topics? We covered Canada, we covered contemporization, we covered the Kathmandu, we covered, no, why don't we go to architecture? We like architecture, right? Okay, so here, you want to be entertaining? So this is, for instance, Mars. Now Mars, okay, we can have cartoons about Mars. Mars is going to be very interesting, and I'd like to get, for instance, the attention of Elon Musk. Elon Musk, there's another guy named Amory Lovins. Amory Lovins is, for instance, a really cool guy. He's at the Rocky Mountain Institute, and he does he has a brain that just, it makes other people's brains blow up because he knows all these details. He's absolutely amazing. Anyway, these kind of people are a trip. Anyway, Elon Musk is fascinated by science fiction and fascinated by Mars. Now, on Mars, you could have used cars. You could have used cars on Mars. In fact, you could have a character. His name could be Carson Mars. Carson Mars could sell cars on Mars. Okay, and what Carson Mars on Mars would be selling with his cars, using a mobile device, of course, is used cars of the future. Okay, now this would of course complement the architecture, right? Now the architecture, let's see, well, we got to make room for the architecture. But anyway, you could have used cars like action figures that basically, you know, you could have a whole bunch of them, And anyway, Ferrari, Tesla from like 100 years from now, that could be a collectible because we are positioning ourselves 300 years in the future. Same as Star Trek. Now, the architecture, we'll go back to the architecture, is fascinating, okay? And this architecture can be like Sunset magazine, right? We have Sunset on Mars, right? So we just have all kinds of architecture. You know, it's just all super cool architecture, and it has technical documentation that plays straight into this thing that we need to have. We need to be able to navigate that thing. Okay, well anyway, we want the money. The money's out of here, hopefully. No sense. It's all no sense, nonsense. Okay, but I don't know what we're going to use if we don't have money. I don't know, something. But anyway, so this architecture issue on Mars, we want to avoid the indentured servitude. We want to avoid all that. We want to have peace on Mars, right? Peace on Mars, peace on Earth. I don't know if that's going to work out. But anyway, the architecture is very, 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 very interesting. Now, what do we put in the architecture? We put pictures of architecture, right? So I have this thing which I call shoji tsuji, and tsuji is actually a move and go, which is actually means a very clever, very interesting move. And I believe that where we're headed is that everything is becoming a flat surface, and that these flat surfaces basically are going to be foldable foundations for further architecture. Now, all of these surfaces and all of these things that do these things are going to be very interesting. So in the land of architecture and interior design, we have what could be called shoji tsuji, or surface architecture. I believe this is yet again another inevitability. What happens with this is that I, as an artist, this whole thing with like mobile devices and the rest of it, that can be one of the surfaces. Then you have solar panels, then you have batteries, then you have light emitting things and all kinds of other things. You have decorative combinations of these things. And the issue, right back to reality again, is that this is again cheap. This is going to be very easy for people to do. It's not going to be that complicated to go to your arts and crafts store and make one of these things for yourself. It's not going to be very hard with a 3D printer to basically make more 3D printers and parts for things like this. So in the land of architecture, we have a revolution that's about to happen, which is basically the assembly of what could be called, we have the usual issues, we have energy, and we have shelter. These are the issues that have confounded human beings for a very long time. That's why we have forest deforestation, that's why you have all kinds of things. But in the land now of hydroponics, for instance, in the land of water filtration, in the land of energy and shelter, solar panels and batteries and 3D printers and other things, without the war, if we don't have the war and don't build giant war bots that are fighting with each other, we basically have everything we need to live pretty well all over the place. The other thing that people can do is that they can build vertically, meaning that if I have an acre of land and if I want to build up, I can go to Dubai. Dubai. And what happens is I can build myself a major tall building that is basically all solar, wind powered, hydroponic, God knows what. And what it does is it delivers food to people around it, okay? Building vertically is available to the entire human race. So what is the excuse? Why are we having a problem? And this is where I am going to get slightly political. The reason I'm going to get political is because basically we're faced with a choice right now. We have a major intelligence choice. This is what happens with doubling. This is 18 months. This is our unit, right? It doubles in 18 months. In 3 years it does this. And in the 4th year it does this. So this has become this. Likewise, the options that are available have done the opposite, meaning that if they're shrinking and not available, this has become this. Now, if you set your parameters correctly, you should have no problem at all basically riding things out and more or less arriving someplace that makes sense if you understand what's going on by taking this into account with what could be called adequate recognition, and sufficient technology. Okay? Sufficient is sufficient. The Koreans have been doing this for centuries. They have peasant houses that are absolutely wonderful, where everything is the right size, everything works out. So have the Chinese, so have every culture seems to have a version of this, but I saw a very beautiful version of this in a museum, where it just was clear as day that the proportion of everything and the application of it were completely sufficient to support a family, and the rest of it, no problem at all. Now, why are we talking about this? Because what we have is an issue of management. And we have a very interesting situation on Earth right now, which is that basically people are forced to participate in the United States of America. Now, they don't necessarily, they might not want to, they might not care about the United States of America, but the way it works is that the United States of America, we only have, our adult population is only 3% of the world's population. However, our impact on the world is almost 100% on a day-to-day level because of our ability to destroy everything. Nobody is really going to argue with us, and we're so used to that since 1945 that we have lived with an artificial relationship with our 3% to the rest of the world. Now, this has been fine because the rest of the world has only until recently been Googled. Okay, the planet was only recently been Googled. Mobile devices have only recently existed. But you can see, and this is again political, with a situation like ISIS, that you have crazy people. They're basically wandering around, building drones, talking on the phone, willing to do all kinds of crazy stuff for what amounts to, again, an abstract depiction of a nation. Now, do they really have a nation? They think they have a nation. We think we have a nation. Everybody thinks they have a nation, but it's basically like Thursday or anything else. It's an abstraction. Okay, the problem with this is that we've been able to do this for a very long time, and there's something that's very cool, which is in the land of marketing, and we're talking about marketing here, and branding and things like that, is that in the land of marketing, if I want to sell something of quality to the rest of the world, and I'm at this percentage, the numbers work out because it's been guaranteed for a very long time that something of quality out of 100% of potential buyers, 1% sales are almost always guaranteed. So we have the perfect relationship with the rest of the world to more or less sell things of quality to the rest of the world, using Google, using our mobile devices, avoiding these pitfalls without a whole lot of problems, right? We don't have to perpetuate this financial attrition situation. But what we have instead is we have a relationship based on what could be called criminal agitation. And criminal agitation is this. Criminal agitation is, guess who knows? Let's pretend that you aren't an idiot if you're running Chase Manhattan. You're not an idiot if you're running any of these major corporations. You're not an idiot if you're like a major lawyer or anything like that. You just simply aren't an idiot. You probably have an IQ of at least 101, so you're not dumb, okay? Now, the thing that's happening with criminal agitation is that within 3 years or less, all of this stuff will have doubled twice. The solar panels and the batteries, the 3D printers, everything else will have doubled twice. Now, what does this mean? It means that there's absolutely no reason to have an argument really about anything. Why would you argue about anything? If we know for a fact that within 3 years we're going to double it twice, and we're talking about energy, and we're talking about all kinds of other things, we should not be having issues of criminal agitation, okay? But look at what's going on, and it's all due to finance. And what the role of finance is basically based on this artificial 30-day cycle, which is really just 30 times 24 hours. 30 times 24 hours, you've got to come up with the rent, you got to pay your bills, you got to pay your phone bills where you talk about making a living, et cetera, so on and so forth, in a land of criminal agitation. Now, the thing that's unfair, basically, is that we have an oxymoron, a conundrum, a paradox, which is finance is making its money or its gain off of labor-saving devices. Now, what happens when you take and make money off of labor-saving devices? Well, you have a need for less labor. But you're selling to the world money that you're making from labor-saving devices. So that in and of itself isn't really going to work because, well, the work's been done. And that's exactly where we are right now. The work has been done. In 3 years, we could be just fine. In 10 years, we could be way good. The work has been done. We do not have to go find America. We don't have to work to get to Mars. We don't have to worry about anything. The work has been done. And so labor-saving devices are abundant. So why is there a lack of money? Okay, that's a major issue. The issue now is a major intelligence test. The major intelligence test now, because of this is the intelligence test. It's a very simple test. And I am going to get political because it's just sad. It's really super sad. We have a buffoon. We have a moron. We have a man who is not a very good, he's a terrible billionaire. He just keeps regurgitating the same money over and over and over again. He leverages stuff. He forgets what he's saying. I never do that. He basically is awful. He's terrible, icky, caca, not good. Okay, that man is running for president. He's far worse than Bush Jr. He's far worse than Reagan. He's far worse than any of these characters. Reagan at least was personable. Bush was at least semi-interested. Poor Trump doesn't really care about accuracy. And what's interesting about accuracy is that if you don't care about accuracy, what use is democracy, right? What are you voting on if you don't care about accuracy? Probably, it makes no sense. Okay, so he's running for president, which is basically a land of what could be called executive action. Now, executive action is available to the world because they have to participate in the United States. Our executive action is important, okay? And we have 51 executives. So it's available for a little while. That what you have one president and 50 governors, and they can all let people out of prison. They can all be controversial. They can do all kinds of interesting things, right? This is what our 51 executives can do. Okay, they can do that at any time because that's what the Constitution guarantees to them. The president is important. So accuracy and management are kind of important in the executive branch. So we have a major intelligence test, and the issue is, in our intelligence test, not what's going on now, but what is going to be going on 4 years from now. Okay, 4 years from now, what's going to be happening? What do we know is going to be happening? We know that the North Pole is going to be melting. It's just going to keep melting. Wind speed's going to go up, crop disasters, stock market disasters, you can't figure anything out. The Great Lakes are rising, the Hudson River is raging, New Orleans is falling into the ocean, Florida is flooding. There's refugees in Bangladesh. The Bangladesh refugees have become Muslims. They get along with the Pakistani Muslims, and well, Trump, him and Muslims, that's great. Mexican Muslims, that's probably going to happen too, Anyway, so what happens is 4 years from now, we have inevitabilities, and these inevitabilities involve very simple to understand things. So why can't we figure out the difference between a woman who basically, let's see, she was married to a president, she's basically been in the White House for 8 years, she knows the Gore family personally, she basically was a Secretary of State, she has a really good college record, she managed to keep her temper while her husband frolicked in the White House and acted an ass. She's a pretty level-headed person, okay? So we have Hillary. Hillary, maybe you don't like Hillary, but Hillary is over here. And we have Trump over here. And we have a crisis of intelligence because basically our electorate, which is only 3% of the world's population, is stuck wondering what to do. We actually have people who want to vote for Trump. They go to rallies and try and believe that Trump has something of use to say in the situation. But really, this is kind of stupid. And it's going to be like really stupid 4 years from now. With Hillary, if we go for another 4 years with Hillary, we might be able to navigate Putin losing his mind, the Chinese trying to take over the ocean, Pakistan going crazy and trying to nuke India, the guy in Korea, you know, becoming a major problem with his submarines off the coast of Alaska, God knows what. Trump isn't really capable of handling any of that. The sad part about what we're dealing with here is just, there's like a whole lot of people that don't really see the difference or the issue. So we have, in the next 3 to 10 years, we have major issues. We have an election right now, which is a major intelligence test. And this is the last normal situation. If, for instance, Trump is elected, it's not going to be normal anymore. If Hillary is elected, no matter what, it's still not going to be that normal 3 to 10 years from now. But this is a major issue, hence my interest in becoming political. I'm going to leave that alone past that because basically, like I said, it's like being in occupied Paris. The Bernie Sanders folk have a lot to say for what the real situation is, which is basically we are in occupied Paris, and this is the corporate states of America. And basically what's going on at any given time is that corporations represent the fourth branch of unmentioned constitutional government because they're protected as people, we the people, but they're not people. They're like Thursday and everything else, they're abstractions. And what they are is they're a very small percentage of the population working in organized concert, internationally and locally, which is something that even the 51 executives can't do, to use financial gain and leverage to their personal satisfaction. Now you could say, is this good, is this bad? The only issue is really, are you interested? And so we're back to the land of depiction. I am not going to risk my life or get involved in situations where I'm always going, thin ice invitations. We could call it thin ice invitations. Come here, come here, come here, come here, come here, come here, out on the thin ice. I am not that interested in doing that. I am interested in inevitabilities. I am interested in things that are real and going to stay real and are always real. So like right now doesn't go away, okay? There are other things like that. So in the land of depiction and in the land of now, just pay attention to some of these, we could call them tools, the tools of depiction. And what's interesting in the tools of depiction, and I've had arguments with people about this. There's a place called the Fashion Institute of Technology, which says it all, basically, right in one phrase, even though this isn't necessarily what they're interested in. It says it right there. The Fashion Institute of Technology, okay? Words are technology. Depictions are technology. Letters are technology. Everything that we use that basically plays the role of agency or representation between one person and another is technology. Okay, so we have a very, very, very interesting situation when it comes to where we are with our technology. Where we are right now with our technology is we have an intelligence choice. And we'll just put it right here, intelligence. I don't fancy myself to be that intelligent. I know that I'm sort of intelligent. Most people are. But the issue is that intelligence is not valueless, okay? And now we're going to get into a situation of semantics. And semantics are important. Let's say, we'll just get sort of philosophical for a minute. Okay, do you exist or don't you exist? Yes, you exist. Okay, so I exist. And this is fundamental to logic. In order for me, you either understand this or you don't. I exist requires a prerequisite, which is that existence exists. But you aren't going to know this from the jump. This is intelligence. I exist leads to existence exists, meaning that in semantics, you have to exist and be intelligent to understand that existence exists. Okay, why is that important? That's important because people will ask, well, is there meaning to life? is any of this important? Okay, the issue of importance, the issue of meaning, the issue of all of that. I mean, look at the situation really quick. The universe is really, really, really big. And we are, locally, right here, the only intelligent life we know about. I mean, we believe in all kinds of other things. We make up stories about all kinds of other things. But the only place in the universe where the universe is actually aware of itself is right here on Earth, at least in the terms that we understand. Now, the animals are aware of themselves, so are the plants and the birds and all of the other things. They basically are aware of themselves and aware of existence, but we are the only ones that have the semantic structure, and Noam Chomsky calls this recursivity, I suppose, where basically we can use our logic of understanding our own existence to understand that existence, that something exists before us and after us, etc., which is, again, plays a role with contemporization. Why is this important? Because this is an age-old issue. And in the land of now, which doesn't go away, it's a very silly, silly, silly thing to say that life has no meaning. It's very silly to say that the planet isn't important. It's very silly to do those things. Because basically, if now doesn't go away, right, then this is important, because it's eternally important, because now is here eternally. So what's happening in the universe, which is amazing and big and the rest of it, importance exists in our little minds and in our talks and the rest of it. So obviously importance exists because semantics exist and existence exists. And existence has defined itself in semantic terms, not separate from us, but with us. So here we are. We actually exist and we have meaning. Therefore, the universe has meaning. Okay? It's really simple. The universe has meaning. Okay, because here we are discussing it. Now, where am I going with the universe has meaning, or I have meaning, or meaning exists? Meaning exists and existence exists. Okay, so meaning exists and I exist. And what we now have is a situation of ignorance exists. And ignorance is the big one. So here we have actual individuation. I'm an actual individual. We're all actual individuals. There's 7 billion human individuals, and there's a whole bunch of insects and a whole bunch of fish and a whole bunch of other creatures. Each of them individuals. They are actual. And they are actual right now, just as the universe is really doing what it's really doing right now, which confounds a lot of people. So you have a bunch of physicists, for instance. Now we're going to go into this territory for a brief second, because it's kind of important. I brought up all this stuff so it'll be on this video. So anyway, let's say I'm a physicist and I want to believe in alternate realities and I want to believe in all this other crazy shit. Well, the problem though with all of that is if it doesn't matter how many of them there are, the issue is reality. And reality is happening right now. Okay, whatever reality is, it's happening right now. Now, there are some things that confound physicists, and one of them is the issue of quantum particles or the issue of congruent particles, right? Now, this is a very interesting puzzle, or not even a puzzle, because what we are ruled by is a continuum paradigm, okay? And we have to let go of some of our concepts and prejudices about how this continuum actually works without destroying reality, okay? So there are a lot of highly paid people who basically are a little bit too clever for their own good, who would like to deny reality through their constructions of time travel or whatever else they believe in. But you can't have time travel because basically the particles cannot be in two places at the same time. They can't. So you can't have the same particle that makes up me now being over someplace else ever, because if it did, it just couldn't happen. Okay, now they'll say, well, no, it can. No, it can't. But what is very interesting is that in the land of congruent particles, it doesn't matter how far apart they are from each other, okay? They could be separated by a whole lot of space, but they don't behave according to anything affected by gravity or the speed of light or any of that. They behave in the same fashion no matter how far apart they are from each other. And people have known that for a while. And what's interesting about that is that in the land of mass, let's say that the universe has issues of mass that affect gravity. Okay? How many congruent particles are there in the universe? Right? You know, right now, how many congruent particles are there? We don't know. But we could say that if it's 1% of 1% of 1%, that could be a significant amount of congruent particles, meaning that they're a part of everything, they're affecting everything, and they basically are more or less, how would we put it? They're a significant amount of mass. Maybe a galaxy's worth of mass, maybe several galaxies worth of mass is made up of a particle that basically it behaves on its own at the same time everywhere, no matter how it is. Okay, the reason that this is important is because quantum then already exists. Now in the land of human manufacturing, in order to have quantum conditions, you have to have clean areas, phenomenal clean areas around the thing that's supposed to behave in a quantum fashion, meaning that they could be on two sides of the solar system, but at the exact same moment, beyond the speed of light, they behave in the same fashion. Okay, that level of human contrivance is the problem. And the reason that it's the problem is because of the issue of, for instance, nuclear energy. The sun is where it is. It's this far from the Earth. This is more or less the proper distance for nuclear energy. That's where nuclear energy should be, about as far away from us as the sun is, because that's what the sun is made of. It's a very dumb idea to put that underneath the atmosphere. But that's what we do. On Earth, we make nuclear energy under the atmosphere. Okay, it affects the water, it does really bad things. The same thing is happening. Physicists, which just basically, they go goofy over stuff like this, they have, I don't know if it's called a cyclotron or whatever it is. It's running under several of the most influential countries in the world. One of them, Sweden. No, what is it? It's not Sweden. Switzerland. Sweden and Switzerland are two different countries, right? Aren't they? Yes. Yes, they are. Okay, so anyway, Switzerland. I have issues with Switzerland, and the reason is because basically how, during World War II, the war to end all wars, did Switzerland watch everybody's money? I mean, who decided that Switzerland was going to watch everybody's money? I mean, we have this big Zeppelin going across the, I mean, think about it. There's a Zeppelin going across the ocean with a swastika on it, and this is like the 1930s, and it's like really cool and stuff, but I mean, really, Switzerland, and I mean, there's something going on here. Anyway, underneath Switzerland and underneath France and a few other countries, they built this giant cyclotron. And what they're doing is that they're doing things with particles that they really don't understand. Now, they think they understand it, but if we have congruent particles, what happens to the congruent particles if you force them through something like this, right? You create this thing of magnets and you're forcing the particles through this thing. Well, we don't know what we're doing to particles that we know nothing about, if in fact they're congruent. Okay, that's again, a really stupid thing to do under the atmosphere of the Earth. This is what human beings do. So in the land of quantum, or in the land of now, we as human beings have an issue of contrivance, okay? And our issue of contrivance is one where in one lifetime, basically, oh, let's say I live to be 100 years old, or whatever happens. That's one small little lifetime. In geologic terms, that's nothing. In terms of the universe, it's nothing. But I am going to know everything. I am going to be able to take the energy of the sun and apply it to things under the atmosphere. I'm just going to do that. I'm that arrogant, and I'm that ignorant, and I'm that clever. Okay, that's just how human beings are. So what's interesting about this issue of quantum now is that what quantum particles prove, and what a lot of this proves, is that it's going on now without the mechanics, okay? Without the contrivance. All of this is happening anyway. And I'm not going to blame Switzerland, but let's say in the war to end all wars, we had a war debt, and I don't know how that happened, and they looked after all these assets. I don't know how that happened. So there's a whole bunch of really super rich people who anyway, it's interesting. Let's call them the Illuminati. We'll just put that on the whiteboard just because all the conspiracy theorist people can go, yeah, he mentioned the Illuminati, yeah. Whatever they are. Anyways, it's interesting that there is certainly a situation where no matter what the conditions, we have both the conditions and safe money. So finance is not going to be easy to get rid of. What happens in 3 minutes?
Out of space.
We're out of this? Yeah. Shall I mention the Illuminati again?
Sure.
Okay. The Illuminati, they dress funny. It's simple. Okay. Okay, so we went all over the place, and now we have 3 minutes, which is actually the ideal place to mention composition. So these little videos, they all really should only be 3 minutes long. And this is going to be edited up and chopped up and things. We're going to play with it. But so we have 3 minutes or less. And so I will go back, I suppose, to the issue of simplicity. And the issue of where we are now and where we will be very soon. And how this is right now very, very, very easy to manage. And I think that's good enough. That for a little while longer, this is easy to manage. Very soon, this is going to slip beyond our control, and the overly clever, we'll just call them the clever. They're just way too clever for their own good. The very clever are going to really mess things up. And they're going to mess it up because, well, they just probably will.